In less than 72 hours, the United States military seized a serving head of state, removed him from his own presidential palace, transported him to New York, and had him standing in a federal courtroom pleading not guilty, all while you were going about your weekend. That's not a film script that occurred last Saturday, and almost no one is discussing what it truly signifies. If you believe what took place in Venezuela doesn't impact you directly, if you think this is merely foreign affairs, just politics, just another headline you can swipe past, you're about to learn how mistaken that belief is. Because this isn't about Venezuela alone. This is about the $100 billion that's about to move. This is about 303 billion barrels of oil. This is about a recurring pattern that has been unfolding for over a century. And it's about to reshape everything from the gas prices you pay to the value of your savings to the global order your retirement depends on. While you were watching sports, while you were at brunch, while you were scrolling through your phone, U.S. forces carried out the most consequential military action on this continent since the Panama invasion in 1989. They didn't reveal it beforehand. There was no congressional debate, no UN resolution, no declaration of war, just a weekend operation that ended with a sitting president in handcuffs on American soil. And by Tuesday, that same nation was agreeing to send over 50 million barrels of oil, with more to follow indefinitely, quietly, systematically, without the headlines you'd expect. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't conjecture. These are direct statements from public court filings, official remarks from the U.S., government multiple oil shipment reports, and news coverage on this military action. I'll cite every source. You can verify them yourself. By the end of this video, you'll understand three key things. First, the precise pattern that predicted this intervention years ahead of time, and why it was always going to end this way. Second, what comes next for Venezuela, for oil prices, and for every other resource-rich nation watching right now. And third, what this means for your money, your investments, and your understanding of how the world really works. Because here's what no one is explaining. What happened in Venezuela isn't new. It's not unprecedented. It's not even shocking if you know where to look. This same playbook has been used before: Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Iran 1,953, Guatemala 1,954. Same justification pattern, same economic preconditions, same result: regime demonization, economic isolation, military intervention, resource extraction, 4 stages, the same sequence every single time. You can either recognize the pattern and understand what it means for the next decade of global politics and your financial future, or you can miss the signs like millions did before Iraq, before Libya, before every resource intervention of the last century. They were taken by surprise too every time. Just give me 18 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Because what you're about to learn will change how you see every geopolitical headline for the rest of your life. Let's go. Right now, the global oil market trades roughly 100 million barrels per day. That's $7 billion in transactions every 24 hours. The U.S. dollar functions as the settlement currency for about 80% of those transactions. That's according to the Bank for International Settlements. Not a blog, not a podcast, the central bank of central banks. This petrodollar system has been the backbone of American economic dominance since 1974. 50 years of global trade flowing through U.S. currency, 50 years of ensured demand for dollars regardless of what the Federal Reserve prints. It's the largest, longest-running monetary arrangement in modern history. And Venezuela holds 303 billion barrels of proven crude oil reserves. That's the biggest in the world, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Iran, larger than Russia. 17% of all known oil on Earth sitting in one nation in America's backyard. But here's the thing. They're only producing 800,000 barrels a day, less than 1% of global output, a fraction of what they should be producing. Why? Because for the last decade that oil has been kept out of the global market, sanctioned, isolated, waiting. Here's what nobody's telling you. The Venezuela intervention wasn't a response to drug trafficking. It wasn't about freeing political prisoners. It wasn't about democracy. Those are the stated reasons, the official explanations. But if you follow the money, if you trace the pattern, you'll see something quite different. This exact scenario has played out before. Not once, not twice, at least 6 documented times in the last 70 years where the United States has intervened directly or through proxies in resource-rich nations following the same precise sequence. Every single time the intervention came within 24 to 36 months of that nation threatening the petrodollar system or nationalizing energy resources. Every single time the stated justification was humanitarian, democratic, or security-related. Every single time the result was regime change followed by resource agreements with Western companies. The sequence isn't similar. It's identical. Stage 1, economic isolation. Stage 2, demonization. Stage 3, intervention. Stage 4, extraction. Mathematically predictable. And once Stage 3 begins, once military forces are deployed, the result has never been reversed. Not once in modern history. Let me show you exactly how it works. I call this the resource intervention cycle. 4 stages, always in the same order, always with the same outcome. Stage 1, isolation. This is where it begins. A resource-rich nation does something that threatens the established order. They nationalize oil fields. They demand payment in currencies other than dollars. They align with rivals. The response is immediate sanctions, financial isolation, frozen assets, trade restrictions. The goal isn't to change behavior. The goal is to weaken, to create economic pressure that causes the population to suffer, to build the preconditions for what comes next. The stage typically lasts 3 to 8 years. During this time, the target nation is gradually strangled. Their infrastructure decays. Their economy shrinks. Their ability to resist weakens. No one is alarmed yet because it's just diplomacy, just pressure, just consequences for bad conduct. Stage 2, demonization. Once economic pressure is in place, the narrative shifts. The leader becomes the focal point, not the sanctions, not the economic warfare. The leader, they're labeled a dictator, a drug trafficker, a human rights violator, a threat to their own people. Media coverage intensifies. Intelligence reports are leaked. Indictments are unsealed. Every action by the target nation is presented as further proof of their illegitimacy. The stage overlaps with stage 1 but quickens in the 12 to 18 months before intervention. The public is being primed. The justification is being constructed. By the end of stage 2, most people have forgotten the original cause, the economic isolation. They only see the monster that was created by it. Stage 3, intervention. This is the pivot, the moment of action. It can come as an invasion, an airstrike, a special operation, or a limited extraction mission. The specifics differ, the outcome doesn't. The target leadership is removed, either captured, killed, or forced to flee. A new authority is installed, sometimes called interim, sometimes called transitional, always aligned with intervention interests. Stage 3 is rapid days or weeks. It has to be before domestic opposition can organize. During this stage, the public is told the hardest part is over. The dictator is gone. Democracy will follow. Stage 4, extraction. This is what it was always about. Resource agreements are signed. Western companies return. Oil flows. Billions in investment are announced. The country will be rebuilt. The people will benefit. The money is managed by the intervening power to ensure it's used properly. If this sounds familiar, it is because President Trump said exactly this on Tuesday, that money will be controlled by me as President of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. Stage 4 lasts indefinitely. The extraction continues until the resources are exhausted or the cycle starts again. Let's verify this pattern. 3 examples, all documented, all following the same sequence. Example 1, Iran 1953. 71 years ago, Iran was a major oil producer. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, later known as BP, controlled its oil fields. In 1951, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the oil industry, taking control from the British-dominated company. This caused a British oil embargo and economic pressure. Mossadegh's government was then overthrown in August 1953, a coup organized by the U.S., CIA, and British MI6 aimed at restoring Western-friendly control and reversing nationalization. Following the coup, Iran's oil industry was reorganized under Western influence, with American and other foreign companies gaining major stakes in Iranian oil production under the Consortium Agreement of 1954. Operation TP-Ajax was designed not only to remove Mossadegh but to legitimize his removal. Stage 2 confirmed. On August 19, 1953, a CIA-directed coup removed Mossadegh from power. It lasted 3 days. He was arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned. The Shah was restored. He would govern for 26 more years with U.S. support until the 1979 revolution. Stage 3 documented. Within months, a new oil consortium was created. American firms previously excluded from Iran received 40% of the new structure. British interests retained their share. Oil flowed again, but now through approved channels. The pattern held. Stage 4 complete. I know some of you are thinking that was 70 years ago. A different era, different rules. Fair point. The CIA formally admitted its role in the Iran coup in 2013, declassified records, official history. The State Department's historical archives contain the full documentation. This isn't revisionist history. This is acknowledged fact. Verify it yourself. Example 2. Iraq, 2003. Iraq 2002, Saddam Hussein had ruled for more than 2 decades. Iraq possessed 115 billion barrels of proven reserves, the 5th largest globally. And Hussein had made a critical error. In November 2000, he announced Iraqi oil would be sold in euros, not dollars. The first major oil producer to challenge the petrodollar since its creation. Sanctions from the Gulf War were already in place, but they escalated. The Oil for Food program controlled every barrel. Iraq's economy was suffocated, stage 1 already underway. The narrative intensified after September 11, 2001. Hussein became associated with terrorism despite no evidence of operational ties to al-Qaeda. The focus shifted to weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence was shaped around the policy. That's the exact wording from the British Downing Street memo later leaked. Colin Powell displayed aluminum tubes and satellite images to the United Nations. The case was assembled. The public was conditioned. By February 2003, millions protested worldwide. It didn't matter. The demonization had succeeded where it needed to succeed in the halls of power. Stage 2 confirmed. March 19, 2003. Operation Iraqi Freedom began. Baghdad fell within 3 weeks. Hussein fled. He was captured 9 months later, hiding underground. Control of the world's 5th largest oil reserves shifted without a shot fired at the oil fields themselves. Those were secured on day 1. Stage 3 complete. One of the first actions of the Coalition Provisional Authority, return Iraqi oil sales to dollars. The Euro experiment ended immediately. Then came the contracts. ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Chevron. The same companies that had been excluded returned. Production eventually doubled. By 2023, Iraq was producing 4.5 million barrels per day. The pattern held, but here's what most people forget. Weapons of mass destruction were never discovered. The stated justification vanished. The oil didn't. Example 3, Libya 2011. Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya for 42 years. Love him or hate him, he had transformed the country into Africa's wealthiest nation by per capita GDP. Free healthcare, free education, subsidized housing, all financed by oil. And then Gaddafi made his move in 2009. He proposed the creation of a unified African currency, the gold dinar. He wanted African nations to insist on payment for oil and resources in gold, not dollars. He had held 143 tons of gold in Libyan vaults ready to back it. Libya had been partially rehabilitated from earlier sanctions. Gaddafi had given up his nuclear program in 2003. He was welcomed at the UN, but the gold dinar proposal changed everything. Financial isolation restarted quietly. In early 2011, amid the Arab Spring protests, the narrative shifted rapidly. Gaddafi was said to be about to massacre his own people. Civilians needed protection. Intervention was a humanitarian necessity. The UN authorized a no-fly zone, nothing more. NATO expanded that mandate within days. The media portrayed rebels as freedom fighters, Gaddafi as a madman threatening genocide. Stage 2 quickened. NATO flew over 26000 sorties. The no-fly zone became a bombing campaign. In October 2011, Gaddafi was captured by rebels and killed on camera in the street. Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, responded on television. We came. We saw. He died. She laughed. Stage 3 complete. The gold dinar died with Gaddafi. The 143 tons of gold vanished, still unaccounted for, according to some reports. Libya's oil production collapsed in the chaos, then slowly recovered under new arrangements. The country remains fractured, fought over by competing factions all backed by different foreign powers. But the petrodollar challenge was eliminated permanently. Stage 4, ongoing. 3 examples, 3 decades apart, 3 different continents, same sequence, same justification, same outcome. Iran nationalization, demonization, coup extraction. Iraq petrodollar challenge, demonization, invasion, extraction. Libya gold dinar, demonization, bombing campaign, extraction. The pattern is documented. The pattern is verifiable, and the pattern just repeated in Venezuela. Let's map precisely. Venezuela's relationship with the United States began deteriorating in 1999 when Hugo Chavez took power and started nationalizing oil resources. But the pattern truly activated in March 2015 when President Obama signed an executive order declaring Venezuela a national security threat. That was the trigger. Stage 1 officially began. What followed was the most comprehensive sanctions regime ever applied to a Latin American country. 2017 financial sanctions blocking access to U.S. debt markets. 2018 restrictions on gold trading. 2019. Full oil embargo seizure of Citgo assets. Individual sanctions on government officials. 2020 secondary sanctions on any company doing business with Venezuela. For 9 years, Venezuela was slowly strangled. Their oil production collapsed from 2.3 million barrels per day to 800,000. An economy 80% dependent on oil revenues contracted by 75%, hyperinflation, food shortages, mass immigration. The conditions were created. Stage 1 complete. The demonization of Maduro intensified in parallel, drug trafficker, dictator, human rights abuser, election rigger. In March 2020, the Department of Justice issued criminal indictments for narco-terrorism, $15 million bounty on his head. Same treatment as Osama bin Laden. The comparison wasn't subtle. Media coverage focused relentlessly on Venezuelan suffering, caused largely by sanctions, while blaming it entirely on Maduro's governance. In 2019, the U.S. recognized an opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the legitimate president. He controlled no territory, commanded no forces, but was received at the White House. This was part of the broader strategy to undermine Maduro's legitimacy. The message was clear. Maduro is not a leader. He is a criminal, occupying a position we don't acknowledge. Stage 2 confirmed. Then came last weekend, the 3rd of January 2026, U.S. Forces conducted what the president called an attack, his word, on Venezuela. In a single mission, they captured the sitting president and his wife and transported them to U.S. soil. No congressional authorization, no declaration of war, no UN mandate, just a military operation presented to the world on Sunday morning. By Monday, Maduro was in a New York courtroom claiming he'd been abducted and was a prisoner of war. The judge disagreed. Stage 3, complete. And now Stage 4 unfolds in real time. On Tuesday, just 3 days after the capture, Trump announced that Venezuela would provide 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. The funds, he said, would be controlled by me to ensure it benefits both countries. On Friday, he announced hundreds of billions of dollars in investment from big oil. He's meeting with Chevron, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips at the White House. Sources told CNBC that oil shipments will continue indefinitely. Venezuela is releasing political prisoners and cooperating on rebuilding energy infrastructure. The second wave of attacks has been canceled because it's no longer needed. 303 billion barrels of oil. The largest reserves on Earth are returning to the global market under American influence. Stage 4 in progress. Now let me tell you what happens next. Based on the pattern, based on history, based on what we've seen in Iran, Iraq, Libya, and every other resource intervention, Venezuela will be rebuilt, but not overnight, gradually, then suddenly. First, sanctions will be selectively rolled back. That's the exact language from White House sources. This means you. S. Companies get access, others might not. The $100 billion in announced investment will flow primarily into infrastructure that benefits extraction pipelines, refineries, export terminals. Venezuelan production will increase from 800,000 barrels to potentially 3.4 million barrels per day within 5 to 7 years. This additional supply will impact global oil prices. More supply means lower prices, potentially significantly lower. That's good for American consumers at the pump. It's catastrophic for Russia, whose economy depends on high oil prices, for Iran, and for other sanctioned producers who can't match the production increase. Watch what other nations do in response. OPEC is already fractured. Venezuela was a founding member. Now it's effectively under U.S. influence. Saudi Arabia will have to choose how to respond to a potential price war. They've been coordinating production cuts with Russia. That coordination becomes much harder when a major producer is back online and motivated to maximize output. The petrodollar system, meanwhile, gets reinforced, not weakened. Any nation watching Venezuela right now understands the message. Challenge the dollar's dominance in energy markets, and you're on the list. But here's what could speed up Stage 4 beyond anyone's predictions. If the Trump administration successfully shows that resource intervention works, that you can seize a president on Saturday, control their oil by Tuesday, and face minimal global consequences by Friday, the playbook is validated. Other nations with large resources and antagonistic relationships should be paying very close attention. Cuba is 90 miles from Florida. Nicaragua is in the same hemisphere. And then there's the question of what happens if Iran, still on the indictment list, still sanctioned, still holding massive oil reserves, becomes the next focus. The potential consequences radiate outward. Energy prices become more unstable, dependent on intervention success, not just market fundamentals. The dollar strengthens as the petrodollar system is enforced, not challenged. Emerging market nations holding dollar debt face increasing pressure. Global alliances realign based on who accepts the new rules and who resists. This isn't speculation. This is the pattern. It's unfolded the same way every time. The only question is pace. I know what some of you are thinking, but Maduro was actually bad. He was a drug trafficker. He did rig elections. He did abuse human rights. This intervention was justified. Fair enough. Let's address that directly. Was Mossadegh in Iran a bad actor? He was a democratically elected reformer who wanted his country's oil to benefit his country's people. We overthrew him and installed a brutal dictator. Was Saddam Hussein bad? Absolutely. He was a murderous authoritarian. We sold him weapons in the 1,980 seconds. We supported him against Iran. He only became Hitler reincarnated when he threatened the petrodollar. Was Gaddafi bad? He was an eccentric dictator who crushed dissent. He also built the most prosperous nation in Africa and was welcomed at the UN after giving up his nuclear program. He became a monster again only when he proposed the gold dinar. Here's the pattern within the pattern. The morality of the leader is irrelevant to the intervention decision. It's only relevant to the intervention justification. Bad actors who support U.S. interests remain allies, Saudi Arabia, current day. Bad actors who challenge U.S. interests become targets. Good actors who challenge U.S. interests, they become bad actors. I'm not defending Maduro. I'm not defending any of these leaders. I'm pointing out that the moral argument is applied selectively. And if you think moral arguments drive foreign policy, you're not paying attention to the pattern. But America is doing this for strategic reasons. Competing with China for resources, securing energy independence, strengthening our position. That's not an objection. That's a description. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. The question isn't whether it's strategic. The question is whether you understand the implications when resource control becomes explicit foreign policy. When the president says on television that he will control another nation's oil revenue, the pretense is dropped. Other nations adjust accordingly. Alliances shift. Trust erodes. The rules-based international order, whatever remained of it, becomes openly transactional. That has consequences for every asset you own, every assumption about stability you've built your life around. The pattern doesn't care about justifications. It doesn't care if Maduro was good or bad, if the intervention was legal or illegal, if you support it or oppose it. The pattern is about resources, power, and what happens when they realign. It unfolds like gravity. Your opinion of gravity doesn't stop you from falling. So, what does this mean for you practically, specifically starting today? First, understand that energy volatility is increasing, not decreasing. Venezuela coming back online means 3 to 4 million additional barrels per day within a decade. That's massive downward pressure on oil prices eventually. But in the short term, production takes years to ramp up. Infrastructure is destroyed. Workers have fled. The transition period will be unstable. Oil prices could spike on instability, then crash on oversupply. If you have significant exposure to energy stocks, understand what you own. Are they high-cost producers who need $70 oil to break even, or low-cost producers who profit at $40? This distinction matters enormously in a volatile supply environment. Second, the dollar is being reinforced, not replaced. Every financial commentator telling you the petrodollar is dying needs to explain how that squares with the United States literally capturing a president to secure oil deals in dollars. The dollar's dominance isn't based on goodwill, it's based on enforcement. Venezuela is a demonstration, not an exception. For your portfolio, this means dollar-denominated assets remain the core. Don't flee to alternatives based on dollar collapse narratives that ignore how vigorously that dominance is being maintained. Third, watch for secondary effects. Russia's economy depends on high oil prices. So does Iran's. So do Nigeria's. So does Angola's. If Venezuela production adds 2 to 3 million barrels per day to global supply over the next 5 years, these countries face severe budget pressure. That creates instability, political risk, and currency risk. If you have emerging market exposure, check where it's concentrated. Countries dependent on oil exports face a different future than countries that import oil. Fourth, pay attention to the next target. The Venezuela intervention was executed with minimal resistance and maximum speed. That success makes the playbook more likely to be used again. Watch the rhetoric around Cuba, Nicaragua, Iran. If you see the same pattern, escalating sanctions, intensifying demonization indictments, the sequence may be in motion. Position accordingly. Don't be surprised by stage 3 when stages 1 and 2 are unfolding in plain sight. Fifth, build your information advantage. What you learned in this video, the 4-stage pattern, the historical precedents, the resource motivation beneath the stated justifications most people don't understand, they react to headlines. They're surprised when intervention happens. They don't see the preparation. Well, you now have a framework. Use it. When the next crisis unfolds, you'll recognize it for what it is. You'll know where in the sequence events are happening. You'll understand what comes next. That knowledge is worth more than any specific trade recommendation. Sixth, reduce concentration risk. The Venezuela situation unfolded in 72 hours. Maduro went from president to prisoner in a weekend. If you have significant assets concentrated in any jurisdiction that might face similar pressure, if you depend entirely on one country's stability, one currency's value, one market's openness, consider diversification. Not panic, not fleeing diversification, geographic asset class currency. The world just demonstrated that change can happen faster than markets can price it. Seventh, control what you can control. You can't control whether the U.S. intervenes in Iran next. You can't control oil prices. You can't control the Federal Reserve or the petrodollar system. But you can control your own financial resilience. Emergency fund, do you have one? Debt levels, are they manageable if volatility hits your income? Flexibility, can you adjust if the world changes faster than expected? These basics matter more than clever predictions. If you found this breakdown valuable, if this framework changed how you see geopolitics and your financial future, subscribe to this channel. The people who navigate what's coming successfully are the ones who see patterns before they complete, who understand what stage we're in, who don't get surprised by headlines. That's what this channel delivers. The next video will break down exactly what 100 billion of oil infrastructure investment actually means, where the money goes, who profits, and what the historical track record shows for countries after resource interventions. Because Iraq, Libya, and Iran all had reconstruction promises too. The pattern didn't stop at stage 4. There's a stage 5, and you need to understand it before the Venezuela situation fully unfolds. This isn't doom and gloom. This is pattern recognition. 150 years of documented resource history, every major power transition, every major intervention. The sequence doesn't change, only the location. Right now, Venezuela's oil is being redirected to U.S. markets. $100 billion in investment is being announced. A captured president is sitting in a New York jail. The world's largest oil reserves just changed hands, and most people still think this was about drug trafficking. They're reacting to the justification. You now see the pattern. We're in stage 4 extraction. The rebuilding has begun. The money is flowing. The oil will follow. But stage 4 has consequences that ripple for decades. What happens in Venezuela over the next 12 months will set precedents for the next 12 years, for energy markets, for dollar dominance, for international law. You can either understand those precedents now and position accordingly, or be surprised by them later. The pattern doesn't wait. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what do you think comes next? Do you see another intervention on the horizon? What questions do you have about the resource pattern? I read every single comment. The best ones shape future videos. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and the notification bell. The next video on the Venezuela aftermath, the stage 5 analysis, drops next week. You don't want to miss it. The pattern doesn't care if you believe in it. It doesn't need your permission. It doesn't require your approval. It just unfolds. Thanks for watching. You now see what most people don't: use that advantage. I'll see you in the next one.